Welcome to the Creative Corner, where art meets inspiration. I'm your host. I'm Otis G. Sanders, professional photographer and published author. I'm in Atlanta today, and we are talking with Kai Johnson. We'll be talking about her new best-selling runaway book, Behind Closed Doors. And Kai, if you don't mind, give us a little background information on you and your writing and all that good stuff.
Hello, I'm Kai Johnson. My background is I'm a New Yorker. I was born and raised in Queens, New York. I moved to Atlanta for college when I was 17, and I've been living in Atlanta since. I'm now married with 2 children, and I've always written. I had a few accolades as a child. When I was in elementary school, I won a statewide New York contest, a poetry contest, and I got an award from the mayor. And so that was my first taste of feeling like I was maybe good at writing, feeling like I had a talent for it. I was always an avid reader. I read a lot of books. I was on punishment a lot. And so for that reason, I was not able to watch TV or go outside on a lot of occasions. And the only thing I could do was read. So because of that, my imagination was running wild. It expanded my vocabulary. And I read a lot of different genres. My first job was at a library. And I worked in stacks. And I used to read all kinds of books that I had no business reading. And so, that started me on my path of loving books and loving writing.
Now, when did you get the idea in your head that you actually wanted to become a published author?
When I was in college, I had a professor who encouraged my writing. He was my English teacher, and whenever we would present assignments, he always encouraged my writing, said that he enjoyed what he read, and he thought that he saw talent there. And I guess I kind of run off of what other people think of things that I like to do. So feeling like he was someone who knew what he would be talking about because he was teaching our class. He was also a published writer. I started writing a lot, and I was published in a few of our college magazines and things like that. And I just started writing as a hobby on the side. I used to dream about being a published writer, but I never really put a lot of effort into it because I'm one of those jack of all trades, master of some kind of people.
Okay.
And I did a lot of things. I used to act. I was a rapper for a little while and was in some videos and did a whole lot of things like that. So I was never really focused specifically on my writing talent until after I had my son in 2003. And then I had a little more time to write, but not a lot of time to focus on getting it published or finishing the book.
Okay. Now, you've written Behind Closed Doors is your first published book?
Yes.
Okay.
I published that in June of 2012. First time I put it out was July. My husband actually, now husband, at the time boyfriend, encouraged me to finish my book. He'd read some of the things I'd written already and really wanted to know what was going to happen at the end. And so that made me want to hurry up and finish it because he was hounding me regularly about finishing the book. And once I finished it, I just thought, well, it'll be cool to actually publish it. I'm about to be 40. I turned 40 last year. And I was, in a state where I wanted to have some things to look back on and accomplish some things. So I said, well, I'll just publish it. And I didn't feel like going through publishing companies, or I published it myself. I really didn't expect anybody to really read it. It was something I thought, my friends might like to read it. And when I published it, it just took off once I told my Facebook friends and family, like, hey, I published a book, which they didn't know I was writing because I had never talked about it.
Okay.
And it just took off from there. And, unbeknownst to me, Amazon readers don't have to be your friends.
Exactly.
to like or read a book.
Yes.
And, I started getting interviews and book clubs asking me to come to their book club meetings. And, once I started seeing all of that, I was like, wow, the feedback was great.
Good.
I learned a lot, I was green. So
Now, since your book is published, what genre would you classify it as?
It's kind of in the middle. I would say, to me, I think that it's urban drama. but there are some racy scenes in it, and a lot of people have compared it to some Eric Jerome Dickey and Zane type scenes within it. But to me, I focus more on the storyline. I just think maybe in sexual situations I'm a little detailed.
Okay. Now we've been talking about you and the book, so right now let's get actually into the book and talk a little bit about Behind Closed Doors, the plot line without giving away everything, and then the inspiration for you writing that particular book.
Okay. Behind Closed Doors is about two siblings who have grown up in a middle class family, somewhat abusive household, but they are now adults, and they have learned a lot about keeping secrets and being manipulative, and they're very judgmental siblings. There's a brother and sister. The book is written in the first person, so each character speaks for themselves in the book. However, all of their judgments don't seem to stem back to themselves. So they are recreating all of the things that they judge everyone else on. And for that reason, there's a lot of promiscuity, there's a lot of bad behavior, a lot of lying, a lot of deceit on both parts. But, of course, most people who are those type of people never see themselves in the mirror. They see everyone else. And so basically it's about them, recreating some of the things in the past and the consequences that come from that.
Okay. Now that the book is done and is published, has it accomplished the things that you wanted it to?
It's far reached more than what I thought I was going to accomplish. It's gotten a lot of accolades. It's actually hit number 1 on the Urban Sellers list for Amazon's Top 100 before. Actually, it's been in the Top 100 probably about 15 or more times that I'm aware of, but it's hit number 1 twice.
Okay.
But that far exceeded anything that I expected of it in the first place. I have had to reprint it a few times because being green and publishing something myself and not really expecting as many great readership as I've had, there were some mistakes that I needed to correct.
Okay. Well, then let's talk about that part. You are self-published?
Yes.
Okay. Did you decide to go self-published as opposed to getting a publisher, or how did that come about?
Initially, I went that route because, like I said, I really had no expectations of it. I just was publishing it just to make an accomplishment for my life. And I just thought that it would just be a longer route to go through a publishing company. Although I have had some interest from a couple of publishing companies, I spoke to a former publisher who advised me not to go with a publishing company because she said with the popularity of the book and all of the things that I was doing myself, that it really wouldn't make sense for me to go ahead and have someone else do the same thing I'm doing and then pay them for it.
Well, now, what's your take on that? Because do you write full time, or do you have a full time job?
I have a full time job, so I'm an accountant in the day.
Now, does that mean you do or you do not have enough time to market the book as well as you want?
I know that I don't have enough time to market it as much as I'd like to. Initially, I was doing a lot of marketing and working at the same time, which is probably why it ended up reaching as high as it did on the Top 100. And like I said, I've had some interviews before. I've been on a few radio shows, things of that sort. And I don't have as much time now. And then I'm also writing the sequels, so my time is limited. However, I think maybe with the release of my second book, I might perhaps look at maybe a marketing company to help, but I don't know if I particularly want to have a publishing company take the lead on that and then have to split and have them kind of tell me what to do.
Okay. So you do realize, or you're saying that you realize that you need more help in marketing the book, not necessarily getting the book done.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you said you made a few mistakes in the beginning
Yeah.
Talk about that and what you would do differently and why you did it the way you did it the first time.
Well, what I would do differently and what I am doing differently this time is I will have a professional editor edit my book. There were definitely some typos.
No, who edited the first time?
That would be yours truly.
Okay. So you won't do that again?
No.
Okay.
No, I will definitely pay a professional editor. I did have another editor along the lines after the book was published offer her services, and she did some editing on it. However, it also, I don't think, was top-notch editing. There were still some issues, and some readers definitely let me know.
Okay. So outside of not getting a publisher, you realize that you do need some other professional help in actually putting the book together.
Yes.
And that's what I hear a lot of self-published authors are lacking in, is the professional part as far as the editing, layout, and just the whole marketing thing of it.
Yes. I think if my intentions at the original publishing of it had been different, if I intended it to be as big as it ended up being for me initially, I probably would have gone a much more professional route with it, especially now that I know that I have a readership, now that I know more things that need to be completed first, because I wasn't aware of a lot of the techniques that I needed to use or a lot of the routes that I needed to go before I publish it until after the fact, because it wasn't something I'd researched. Now, having more experience, having been exposed to more authors and more writing techniques and such, the second book will be way more professional, and I don't expect anyone to find any typos in it. And I'm probably going to have the original Behind Closed Doors is probably going to be republished. I am going to pay for an editor to edit that as well.
Now, did you use your own cover artwork, or somebody else did that for you?
Yes, I created my own artwork for that one. I just did that in my own house. I mean, I'm kind of a do-it-yourself kind of person, and I'm pretty good with the computer, and so I just used my phone, took some pictures, and then put it in PowerPoint, and made my design myself, and I thought it would be sufficient. I thought I would make some eye-popping colors on it to draw people to it, and I used that. And that's something that I'm still debating on, whether or not I'll do a professional cover for the sequel, or whether or not I'll do my own. I do have some ideas for it.
Okay. Now that you've gotten this one done and you're working on the sequel, mm-hmm. or the next installment, mm-hmm. are you now thinking about becoming a full-time writer?
I would not do that unless I was making a lot of money at it, because right now as an accountant, I'm making a pretty good salary, and I have a family to support, 2 children who will need college funds, and a husband and a household. So that's something I would love to do. That ultimately, that's my dream. If my husband had a job that could support me to stay home, I would do that. Okay. But I think that I would have to see some real profit in order for me to quit my job. And ultimately my dream would be to have one of my books turned into maybe a TV show, or a movie or something of that sort, and that would probably be something that would make me reconsider a full-time job.
Okay. Now, talk about the fact that the book is set in Atlanta. I saw some Midtown Atlanta, some Buckhead in there. Mm-hmm. Is that just because you grew up here not grew up here, but you went to college here? Right.
Yeah, I think because during my college years, let me just stress that it took me a long time to publish the book. So
long time meaning?
A long time meaning 10 years practically.
Really?
I started writing it 10 years before it was published, and so there was a lot of time gaps in between the time that certain sections were written, and things changed a lot over time, and I had to go back and re-edit. And at the time that I began writing it, Buckhead, Atlanta was the place to be. It was the popping district, especially for young Atlanta in your 20s. That was the main place to be, and that was the hangout spot for everything. And it still is to some extent now, but it was a little more of a club scene at the time that I started writing it. So I focused more on that area because I was familiar with it. I was familiar with hanging out there and the crowd that was there.
Yeah, and that's what kept me really interested in the book when I was reading it, because when you as you were writing, I'm picturing myself at some of those spots. Not exactly saying spots because I don't know if they were made up or what, but
they were made up for the most part.
Yeah, but in those parts of town,
right? But the areas were real, right?
The new housing development and everything, I could just kind of picture the high end industrial looking buildings and stuff like that. It was a great read. It was a great read.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So this next book is going to be finished in about how long?
I'm shooting for December. I started writing it. I started writing the sequel at the beginning of the year, but I did have some delays because I got married and I had to kind of focus on my wedding and some other things. But I'm back on track. Right now I'm 16 chapters in, so I'm shooting for finishing it by December. Hopefully having it published either by the end of the year or at least within the first few months of 2014.
Okay. Now, with the first book, you learned a whole lot of things as far as production, editing, the whole 9 yards. Tell me about some of the things that you've learned about marketing and sales. Since you already got the numbers and you know what the numbers will look like, tell me how you're going to make those numbers happen.
Well, I think a better quality read is definitely a plus. You can get way more support from, people who read professionally, and if you need someone to make a review and such, if you have a better quality read, it's a lot easier to say, hey, can you review my book and post it on your website. I've done a lot of socializing with different authors in various places. I've used my alma mater, Spelman College, and I've sold books on campus, and so some of that networking, I've definitely learned how to promote myself. When I'm out in the streets, you see someone who looks like they might read your genre of book and maybe pass them a business card.
What do they look like?
To me, it looks like anyone who looks like they read, because there's been some white women, even some at my job, my boss, who I would never think would be interested in my genre, which I still don't think he even is, but to be supportive of me. He's an older white man. He had them tell everyone at my company that I wrote a book, and a lot of ladies just read. So to me, whoever reads is someone who might like my genre. If you read and you're not squeamish about sexual scenes and maybe some vulgarity, then you might enjoy my read. My mother, I didn't want my mother to read, or my father. I didn't want either one of them to read the book. I just wanted them to see the dedication and put it down. But that's not what happened. They read it and they were a little astonished, but they enjoyed it. So.
But now let's talk about that though. Now, there are a lot of things going on in there.
Right.
Are these experiences that you've had personal relationships to, or you've seen it happen and you just thought you'd elaborate, or how does that work?
For the most part, I have a vivid imagination.
Okay.
But I think some of the thought processes and some of the characters are things that have either happened to me or to people I know. Maybe I've incorporated different things from other people. I know myself as a 20-something-year-old, I was not as smart as I maybe thought I was in relationships, and tended to be drawn towards certain guys that maybe were not the best, and started thinking that I could make a person change their mind or change the way that they did things, because if I was, cute enough, or, I did certain things in certain ways, he would change his ways. So I think some of the naive and ignorant characteristics of Brenda are maybe some that I've experienced myself.
Okay.
But for the most part, I would say 90% is my imagination.
Okay. Now, if you had to give a percentage to areas in marketing and sales that give you the most impact, what would those areas be?
I would say book clubs. I think that building a relationship with book clubs I think it would increase my marketing by at least 40%, because once you get one member of a book club, all they need to do is say, hey, let's do this book for this month or this week or whichever way that book club runs. Then you have a number of ladies or whoever is in the book club purchasing your book. What I've done is if someone has a book club of 5 or 6 people or more, and if it's somewhere I can get to, I would be more than happy to come to their book club meeting. And that has worked for me. I've been to maybe 4 book club meetings where the ladies were excited, and it helps me to want to write. It's exciting for me to listen to how excited readers are about the book and get their feedback. And I think that generates a lot, especially because a lot of book clubs now have their own websites, and some people really pay attention to what certain other readers think and what their reviews are.
Okay, so you're taking book clubs over book signings for the most part?
I think for me, in my experience anyway, book signings have not been as successful as finding your actual readers and then stemming off of who they know. Maybe getting someone, word of mouth has worked a lot for me. If I get one friend who likes the book and they tell their friend, they tell a sister, and maybe they have a relative or something. But to me, book signings are random because sometimes people don't have the time to come out. They might actually like the book, but they don't have time to get there. And then you're just sitting there with a ton of books, waiting for someone to come. And strangers sometimes don't want to take a risk at getting a book just because they see you there. They feel the pressure of you trying to force them to get a book. So I think my best route is actually finding someone that I know is at least interested in trying the book and then trying to expound on their connections.
Okay. Sounds good. So do you have a title and all that good stuff yet for the next one?
Yes. The sequel is called Liar's Ball.
Okay.
Which is something else, by the way, that I learned, that you need to research a title before you use it. I was not aware until I published Behind Closed Doors that there are so many other behind closed doors.
Did you think that made a difference with you? Because it seems to me that, you can't necessarily copyright titles.
Right.
But if you market it like crazy, you can make it your own,
I think that it can cause confusion though, because if there's so many other books with the same title, then when people look for your book, there's no telling what they're going to pull up before they actually get to your book, which is something I found on Amazon. I could tell my ranking by where it's placed because there are several other Behind Closed Doors. There's actually a very popular author who has a book by the same name, which I forgot that I read. So, I said when I thought of this sequel, I made sure to look around first to see whether or not there was any such name anywhere.
But then that would be part of that, the marketing and research,
right?
That you didn't necessarily do on the first.
Right. I have become a very detailed person now, because I feel like I owe it to myself and I owe it to my readers to know what it is that I'm doing when I'm going to publish it. So. I looked that up first, and I think it is important to make a distinction between yourself and someone else because some readers are confused, and someone may read your book by accident because they think it was someone else's, which could work in your favor or not.
Yeah, if they like it. Yeah,
right.
But now, talk about crowdfunding. Have you tried that, or do you know anything about that?
I haven't tried any funding. I know that I could, but I guess I feel like unless I have a specific project that I'm working on as pertains to my book, that the majority of what I need to do, I can probably fund myself and get some money back on it. I feel like if I'm relying on someone else, then of course that means that I need to make sure that I can produce for someone else and be able to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do with this money and this is where it's going to go. And because I'm not really sure about that right now, I'd rather not mislead people into thinking that I need a lot of money for something that I don't know what I'm doing with either. So, yeah, for now, until I have some type of specific need for something that I can't afford myself, not that I have a lot of money, but I haven't had to spend a lot of money thus far for it.
Okay, great. I think that brings us pretty much close to the end of our talk here. And before you go, let's give the listeners places to buy your book.
Okay. You can get it probably anywhere online at this point. Amazon is my biggest seller right now, but you can also get it at Barnes and Nobles. You can also get it in the bookstore at Barnes and Nobles, but it's something that you have to order. But they
Okay.
do carry it in paperback there, and you can purchase it in paperback or ebook on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and I found several other online websites that are selling my book also.
Okay. And once again, the name of that book is Behind Closed Doors by Kai Johnson.
Right, it's by K.F. Johnson.
K.F. Johnson, I'm
right.
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. And that will conclude this episode of the Creative Corner, where art meets inspiration. And you guys tune in again next time. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about this great book, Behind Closed Doors.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Is there any last closing remarks you'd like to make?
I'd like to say that if you haven't read Behind Closed Doors by K.F. Johnson, please go out and get that because the sequel is coming and it is going to be 10 times racier, 10 times better, and much, 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 much more saucier than the first one.
Great, great, great. Be sure to give me a call so we can do another interview for the follow-up.
I'd love to.